Thank you, Caitlin. We're going to be hearing more from you. That's just wonderful. It's exactly what Gabriel said. The long-term relationships, they never let you go. You're going to always be part of the project, and that's a good thing. Finally, we're going to hear from Sarah Ray-Solinga, who is the Senior Director of the Urban Education Institute, as well as Associate Clinical Professor on the Committee of Education. She leads research projects focused on teacher quality, and she also teaches within the Urban Teacher Education Program. She teaches and advises undergraduate and graduate students at the University of Chicago. In addition, she supports evaluation research across the Institute. And Sarah's going to talk to us and give us some of her insights about the study, what she's learning from it, and how those insights can maybe be applied as we go forward, not only with project exploration, but with this field in general. Sarah Ray-Solinga.
Thank you and good morning. So my role here is to provide some reflections, both on the project exploration 10-year study, to celebrate some of the accomplishments of project exploration, but also to use research to pinpoint some areas that project exploration can think about moving into the next decade or the next 2 decades or the next 3 decades or however long project exploration is serving students in the way that you just heard from the powerful testimonial that Caitlin provided. The Urban Education Institute at the University of Chicago, in case you don't know what we do 4 things. We train urban teachers for Chicago in the Urban Teacher Education Program. We conduct applied research at the Consortium on Chicago School Research, and Paul Gorin, our Lewis Sebring director, is present here today. We run 4 campuses of charter schools on the south side of Chicago, one of which is the North Kenwood Oakland Charter School, where Caitlin came from, who is a graduate from one of our schools. And we run a nonprofit organization that takes what we've learned and we're building tools that will go across the nation, across a number of dimensions. And the research that I'm going to be using to reflect upon the project exploration 10-year study and on the work of project exploration, in the brief time that I have to talk to you now, I'm just going to pull a couple of very brief findings. I'm happy if you want to learn more to share a longer memo that I wrote for project exploration, and also to point you to a couple of the studies that the consortium has conducted that I'm going to be referencing. But this is just to give you a flavor of some of the recommendations that I provided. I'm going to be relying upon 4 sets of research. One is a very important study, a seminal study that has been conducted at the consortium that's called From High School to the Future. And it's a set of studies led by Melissa Roderick and her team that focus on the pathway to post-secondary options from Chicago Public Schools. The second is a report that was led by Nick Montgomery, a researcher at the consortium, called Passing Through Science, that looks at the increased science requirements in Chicago Public Schools and the result of that. And then I'm going to focus a little bit on social capital research and on resiliency research to think about how project exploration can improve going into the future and to acknowledge some of the accomplishments that they've had over the last 10 years. So starting with Melissa's research, this is a massive set of studies with a number of both alarming and important findings. But really one of the most important things that's related to what project exploration does is that Melissa and her team discovered that college-going rates vary significantly across ethnic and racial groups and across high schools in Chicago. Some of the most alarming findings from that is we found that about 6% of Chicago Public Schools graduates get a college degree by the time they're 25. And if you're an African-American male, that number looks a lot more like 2%. These are alarming numbers. And so it's important that project exploration is serving these students, particularly low-income Latino and African-American students who have the most troubling graduation statistics. The other piece of the research that I think is relevant here focuses on the influence of attending a high school that has a strong college-going culture. Roderick's team really found that this is a powerful indicator, if you go to a high school with a strong college-going culture, of the way in which students engaged or didn't engage in the application process for college. So one of the questions that I pose to project exploration is, can you establish a more explicit focus on establishing this college-going culture and this focus on persistence in college as a part of the larger programmatic goals for project exploration? Can you build college-going culture focus in this after-school setting in the way that it's described in the consortium's research? This Passing Through Science report, again, looked at the changing requirements of increased course taking in science in Chicago public schools. Nick Montgomery led the research. And the report focuses on some accomplishments, which is that more students in Chicago took more science as a result of the requirements, the course requirements in Chicago. That being said, there's still much work to be done on learning how to engage students in scientific learning. So engagement, science engagement, and actually having students achieve at high levels within those courses is still a challenge in Chicago public schools. And so my reflection to Project Exploration is that they can play a critical role both in perhaps inserting themselves into helping Chicago public schools learn how to build course programming in science that increases student engagement. Given the findings in the 10-year study, this is one of the powerful things that Project Exploration does. And so can we think about this partnership as extending to advising Chicago public schools on how to engage students around science course taking? Third, this social capital research. The relevant findings around the social capital research really link and dovetail very well with the findings on the Project Exploration 10-year study. We know that social capital improves the outcomes of young people, and we know that it's most powerful when it's focused on actual content and a shared activity and course of activities together, and that positive social capital has tremendous effects on the life chances and outcomes, especially of young people, in increasing their confidence and self-image. What's interesting is that Project Exploration is already built around a social capital model, really at two levels. Social capital among the community of peers learning science together, and social capital building between the students and the adult professionals and educators in science. And so this in and of itself creates positive, powerful potential to build social capital. And making this a more explicit focus and goal of Project Exploration can allow both to measure outcomes in a deep way and also to more intentionally build social capital among students that can help them as they make the transition to college. Finally, the resiliency research. There's a body of research that suggests that investigates why some individuals facing challenges persevere and persist and have positive outcomes, while other individuals facing the same challenges do not. And these are often called resiliency traits. What is it that are built in these youth that help them to persevere and persist in spite of these challenging circumstances? We know that resiliency can be built. We know that it's most powerful when it's built through relationships. And we know that powerful programs that build self-efficacy and confidence help to build resiliency. So again, I encourage Project Exploration to think about resiliency building as an explicit outcome or goal of their programming, and focusing more intentionally their programming on these resiliency traits that we know in research are important, things like self-confidence, efficacy, optimism, and a sense of responsibility. This leads into, and I'm just going to highlight 3 of the recommendations that I made around future research, starting with the social capital and resiliency piece in particular. I think one of the important parts of the research agenda for Project Exploration going forward is thinking about measuring around outcomes that they already know matter in their programming. So if we already know that the programming is building social capital and has the potential to build these traits, these resiliency traits, then more intentionally collecting data on those types of outcomes in order to demonstrate the efficacy of the program. And so encouraging them, and Juna and I talked about this a little before the program started, about more intentionally building comprehensive databases about the students, and in particular using something like the consortium's on-track indicator to understand both the incoming nature, the incoming characteristics of the students who enter the programming, and the effectiveness of the program in contributing to their outcomes. And also trying to build instruments that more intentionally collect information around things like social capital and resiliency and self-efficacy, both at the beginning before students enter the program, mid-course in the program, and at the end of the program. So these are some of the recommendations to help to just reflect on both what Project Exploration has accomplished and also to push us to start thinking about the next generation of project exploration programs and how we measure deeply the kind of effects that this program is having on students.
Thank you. Much rich information and conversation to have. So I'd like to ask our panel to just step up to the plate, and we're going to have a little bit of conversation up here.